14th April. So it's a ninth update. So it is a follow-up of the previous two talks that I had given on hydroxychloroquine, bar chloroquine as prophylaxis and treatment. So as we are seeing off late, there have been studies which don't seem to be showing great benefit with the usage of hydroxychloroquine. So I thought it is good that I comprehensively cover all the chloroquine studies into one talk and make a summary out of it. So the topics that I would cover is again just an overview on mechanism of action of chloroquine. So I'll be talking about four trials. So now, right now, it is in a sort of a equipoise. There are two positive trials. One has come from France, one has come from China. The Gautret trial, which we all have gone through before, and there are two negative, and another positive trial is by Chen et al. Two negative trials, which is very recently has come a few days back from a Brazilian group, which is in a pre-publication manuscript, and there's one from USA. This is a controversial because it says preprint proof from a NEJM, so we aren't sure whether it is really published in NEJM. So this study was done in Henry Ford Hospital, two US hospitals. So I'll talk briefly on QTC algorithm in the light of concerns being raised on the safety of chloroquine, because there has been a lot of buzz about how safe is use of hydroxychloroquine, more so with azithromycin and oseltamivir, because the risk exponentially increases. So Mayo Clinic has come out with an algorithm to how to oversee and take steps to curtail the QTC prolongation. So after reviewing these trials, we'll see what current guidelines are suggesting and take home message. So if you look at the mechanism of action, so which was described in this paper which came from France, so we understand that hydroxychloroquine causes alkalization of the phagolysosomes and inhibit the entry of virus into the cells and enhances the phagocytosis. So this is what we understand. So most of the evidence about the effectiveness of chloroquine predominantly have come from in vitro studies. So in vitro they have done studies in Veros E6 cell lines. So they have done this in vitro studies to see the effective concentration of hydroxychloroquine that is required to be effective against this COVID virus. So that is where they have done studies, and they found that the 50% effective concentration of chloroquine is around 1.13 microliter per milliliter, and 90% effective concentration is 6.9 micromilliliter. So this was the observational study from the French group. In vivo, they used chloroquine in 100 patients, and they saw they have described significant reduction in the exacerbation of pneumonia, significant reduction in the duration of symptoms, delay in viral clearance, and reduced length of stay. So this was just an observational study in 100 patients with a single arm, where they found this had a favorable benefit on the outcome. So again, we reviewed this particular paper which has elaborated on the mechanisms of action again. So as you see, this is the COVID virus which binds to the ACE receptor present on the cell membrane, and this chloroquine has shown to have direct sort of a effect on coronavirus, and it has an indirect effect. Indirect effect is by causing terminal glycosylation of the ACE receptors. So when there is a glycosylation of this ACE receptor, so this COVID virus has this S protein called spike protein, which you see like an antenna. So this spike protein binds to the ACE receptor because there is a terminal glycosylation that happens because of chloroquine. So binding, effective binding of COVID virus to this receptor can be interrupted. So this is how it has shown to have beneficial effect. So once the COVID virus binds to this ACE receptor, so it releases this RNA into the cell, into the cell, and these RNA, for it to mature and to replicate, to form more viruses and more proteins which are deleterious to an individual, it needs these enzymes, protease and glycosyl transferase enzyme, which are present in the endoplasmic reticulum. So this particular hydroxychloroquine, bar chloroquine, so it impairs the action of this protease and glycosyl transferase in the endoplasmic reticulum, so that there is interruption or mitigation of maturation and replication of this virus in the cells and formation of more proteins. So Vincent et al. In 2005 first demonstrated significant sort of clinical beneficial effects with prophylaxis. So significant prophylactic effect lasted for 24 hours if they give chloroquine before 24 hours prior to exposure. And he also suggested that even post exposure to a virus within 5 hours, it had a prophylactic effect. in post-exposure prophylaxis. So this was published in 2009 by this Belgian group. So that is one mechanism of action where you see that chloroquine has a direct effect on the virus and has an indirect effect by causing glycosylation of the ACE receptor, and it impairs the enzymes which are needed for maturation of RNA. So in addition to that, the COVID virus has a lot of other deleterious proteins. So these are some of the proteins that are identified: ORF10, ORF3A, ORF1AB, and these proteins are known to attack the heme component in the hemoglobin. So this is the hemoglobin molecule. So these proteins are known to attack this heme component, the yellow one what you see, on the beta 1 chain of the hemoglobin. By attacking this heme component, there is dissociation of iron from the heme component, and it gets dissociated into iron and porphyrin. And the ORF8 protein, it binds to the porphyrin, and this binding of this is inhibited by hydroxychloroquine, because this binding of this protein to porphyrin is needed to inhibit the entry of this COVID virus into the cell. So this binding is inhibited by hydroxychloroquine. So the reason why we need to understand mechanism of action is to appreciate the multimodal effects of hydroxychloroquine. So it acts on ACE receptor, it has a direct effect on the cell, then it has an ability to minimize the maturation and replication, and then it also has an effect on porphyrin by inhibiting the binding with porphyrin, so that entry of virus into the cell is curtailed. So that's about mechanism. So we'll talk about two positive trials. So this was the trial which made a lot of news post pandemic with the COVID virus, which came by Gautret et al. On 17th March 2020. So this study was done in 1st March to 16th March 2020. So most of these studies, what you would see, is done in a very narrow window of time. The reason being, we are in an extraordinary pandemic situation. So on 14th March 2020, the documented cases of COVID in France was around 4,500 cases. So the treatment the authors subscribed to was chloroquine 500 mg twice a day into 10 days is what is generally was prevailing before. But here in this study, the authors use hydroxychloroquine, and the justification the authors give is because hydroxychloroquine has a greater safety than chloroquine, and there is a possibility or a feasibility to give higher daily dose of hydroxychloroquine when compared to chloroquine, and there is reduced concern with drug to drug interactions when we use hydroxychloroquine as opposed to chloroquine. So the inclusion criteria for this study was age more than 12 years, and all patients had to have the reverse transcriptase PCR positive for SARS-CoV-2. Exclusion criteria was any allergy to chloroquine or G6PD deficiency, or any retinopathy or breastfeeding patients, or they have pre-existing QT prolongation. So these were the exclusion factors. So what did the authors do? So they gave treatment at day 0, and they did daily nasopharyngeal swabs until day 40. So they gave the drug for 10 days, and they did the swabs every day up till day 14. They gave hydroxychloroquine 200 mg 3 times, which is 600 mg cumulative dose for 10 days they gave. And they stratified the patients into 3 groups. The first group was asymptomatic patients. So 16.7% of the patients in the study were asymptomatic, but they still used this hydroxychloroquine. But the predominant proportion of patients were symptomatic with URTI. 61.1% had URTI, 22.2% had LRTI symptoms. So I would assume it will be SARI, severe acute respiratory infection. So what were the results? The mean age of the patients in their study was 45.1 years, and 41.7% were males. So in this study, females were more with COVID. And interestingly, the authors also measured the serum hydroxychloroquine in 20 patients, and the serum levels, the median serum levels was documented as 0.46 micrograms per ml, plus or minus 0.2. So if you look at the results, 36 patients, follow-up was done for 6 days. 26 were in hydroxychloroquine group, 16 were in control group. And age, if you see, the higher age groups was present in hydroxychloroquine group, younger age group was present in control, although it tended to move towards statistical significance. So they looked at day 6 viral clearance, and they saw the viral clearance was significantly better in hydroxychloroquine group, 70%. This is when we subscribe to using this, considering that yes, by using this you can mitigate the viral transmission or viral shedding, and you could limit the transmission. So 70% as compared to control group, where viral clearance was only 12.5%. That was statistically significant. And they did a subgroup analysis where they took a group where they got both drugs, hydroxychloroquine with azithromycin, and compared to a group which got only hydroxychloroquine. So 6 patients got combination hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin, 20 got only hydroxychloroquine, 16 got was a placebo group. And they saw that day 6 viral clearance was 100%, and that was statistically significant. So this excited. So when this paper came out, most of the treating clinicians who are dealing with COVID got excited for obvious reason that we could succeed in at least clearing of the virus. So in the discussion, the authors do discuss that the viral clearance happened from day 3 and extended up to day 6. And when they compared with control group, at day 3 it achieved statistical significance in its ability to clear the virus. So this is what they, and hydroxychloroquine had a, the author subscribed that it had a synergistic effect with azithromycin. So this is a graphical representation. The red one is hydroxychloroquine, where you see the reduction in the viral clearance, I mean increase in the viral clearance as compared to the control group. The green one is hydroxychloroquine with azithromycin, where you see the viral clearance is much more effective when you combine with azithromycin. The blue one is hydroxychloroquine, this is a control group. So in the discussion, the authors do mention that hydroxychloroquine, when you compared with chloroquine, hydroxychloroquine was found to be more potent, and the 50% effective concentration was 0.72 micromilliliter as compared to chloroquine, where you need a higher effective concentration to achieve therapeutic effect. And what authors very interestingly found was the effectiveness of hydroxychloroquine seemed to be better in symptomatic patients than in asymptomatic patients. So the effect of this drug was significantly higher. So which means to say this drug had a better effect in patients who were symptomatic than patients who were asymptomatic, and that was also statistically significant. So the limitations of this study the authors subscribe to is it's a small sample size, and the follow-up was very limited time because of the acute nature of the pandemic and the intent to publish it soon. And this is the major criticism of this patient, which many critics have highlighted, where the 6 patients were taken out of the study, and these 6 patients had died, and the deaths were excluded from the study after they were initially taken into account. So this is the major criticism. Had you accounted for these 6 patients who have died, maybe the statistical significance of viral clearance may not have been achieved, is what the criticisms of this paper has been. So the conclusion from this paper is treatment with for COVID with hydroxychloroquine at 600 mg per day with azithromycin seemed to have beneficial effect on viral shedding, and predominantly it may help us in limit viral transmission. So that was the summarily conclusions of this study. So this is a small study which came very recently by Chen et al. In April 2020. It's a Chinese study. Effect of hydroxychloroquine. This is also a positive study in patients with COVID-19. Results of randomized control trial. So this study was done in this hospital called Renmin Hospital, again in the Wuhan province. This study was done between 4th to 20th February 2020. Here the authors looked at the primary endpoint is to time to complete resolution. They called it STTCR, time to complete resolution of symptoms. They looked at radiological resolution of symptoms, and they looked at clinical progress. So they charted all these findings from baseline up till day 5. Radiological improvement, they divided into 3 categories. The first category is where after the initiation of treatment they had worsening of X-ray. The second group is where X-ray features or imaging features remain unchanged. The third group has improved. So these were the 3 broad categories they put the radiological progress. So here, if you see hydroxychloroquine, they have used lesser dose than the French study, 400 mg once a day. French used 600 mg. Here they use 400 mg once a day for 5 days. French used it for 10 days. Here they are using it for 5 days. And here the Chinese authors do suggest that it has a hydroxychloroquine has an effect in reducing cytokine storm, and it does regulates these other cytokine variables like tumor necrosis factor alpha, interleukin 1 and interleukin 6. So again you appreciate that the hypothesis of mechanism of action is multimodal. So it has an effect on that porphyrin what you see, and then it had an effect on endoplasmic reticulum, then it had a direct effect on ACA glycosylation, and now it has an effect on your cytokine reduction also. So this is how they charted from day 0 to day 6. They did 2 CTs. On day 0 they did 1 CT, day 6 they did 1 CT, and every day they monitored the clinical signs and symptoms. Predominantly they looked at body temperature and cough. They assessed every 3 times every day. They assessed this. So what was the results? 46.8% were males. Mean age was 44.7 years. So they had 62 patients, 31 in hydroxychloroquine group and 31 in control group. So time to clinical resolution, which they charted every day 3 times, which is fever and cough, significantly was lesser in hydroxychloroquine group. So the resolution of symptoms happened much better in hydroxychloroquine compared to control. That was statistically significant. And radiological improvement, where they had 3 categories: unchanged, worsening, but the improvement happened much more significantly in hydroxychloroquine group as compared to the control group, 80.6% versus 54. That was also statistically significant. So these were the 2 positive trials. After these 2 positive trials came, there are 2 negative trials that came. Both, at least from last I read, haven't come in a published manuscript. They are pre-public publication manuscript which I've gone through. So this is the very latest. This came just around 4 to 5 days back. It's by a Brazilian group. It was called Chloro COVID-19 study. So the intent of the study is mainly to look at the safety of high dose. There's no placebo arm in this. They compared high dose chloroquine. It's not hydroxychloroquine they use. They use chloroquine. High dose chloroquine and compared with a low dose chloroquine. And this study was done in this very big hospital called Hospital E Pronto Rinaldi Abdil in a western Amazon region. So it is one of the biggest hospital which is identified for COVID management. They had, which is sort of set up to accommodate 350 ICU beds. So it was done in this Brazilian hospital. The trial start date was 23rd March 2020. You can see as recent as few days before this trial was started. Inclusion criteria was age more than 18 years, and the criteria was, so they really took all sick patients. They took patients who had SIRS response, who had tachycardia, who had hypotension, and who were tachypneic with respiratory rate more than 24 and saturation less than 90%. So they basically took sick patients, and primary endpoint was to look at day 28 mortality. Secondary endpoint was to look at day 4 and day 6 mortality, and they looked at day 14 and day 28 clinical improvement, and duration of mechanical ventilation, hospital length of stay, and time taken from treatment to discharge bar death. Although the intent was to look at these endpoints, this study was stopped much earlier because of safety concerns, because they had more side effects in patients who got high dose chloroquine. So this study did not sort of continue to follow up on these secondary endpoints. And they even looked at viral clearance at day 0 and day 4. So it's a parallel double-blind randomized controlled trial. So these are the 2 doses they compared. High dose is 600 mg twice a day for 10 days they give. So again, as I mentioned, if you look at the previous 2 trials, so they have used hydroxychloroquine, and we understand the authors in the French trial also have subscribed, saying hydroxychloroquine has less toxicity. So when that is subscribed to, so we really do not need to embark on giving this high dose of chloroquine, clearly understanding HCQ appears to be much more safer than chloroquine. So in that way, the study has few limitations, and they don't have a placebo arm. So they compared 600 mg twice daily into 10 days with a low dose, which is 450 mg once a day for 5 days, or a cumulative dose of 2.7 grams. Along with it, the patients got ceftriaxone with azithromycin plus or minus oseltamivir. So they included 81 patients in their study. So this is the results. So if you look, the older patients were in a higher dose chloroquine. Again, that may be limitation, because there is already some bias that you are exposing older population to a higher dose, which may be a worrying sign for me. So that again becomes an important limitation. And even more surprising, you see that higher dose chloroquine group had patients with more coronary artery disease. Again, you are putting them at a risk. So basically, you have taken a cohort of patients who you understand are at a much higher risk for developing complications, and put them in a high dose chloroquine group. And what you find? You find more arrhythmia syndrome. This is what this study is trying to show. So if you see, the QT prolongation more than 500 was found to be significant, was much higher in the high dose chloroquine. Although you see p-value not significant, authors have gone on to show this comparison with the previous 2 trials. They've taken the French trial and the Chinese trial. They did a meta-analysis. They have taken odds ratio, compared that odds ratio to this, and they found statistical significance, and they stopped the trial, saying that this dosage compared to our historic data shows higher side effects. So this is how they have concluded. And the ventricular tachycardia also was found in 2 patients, so which was a worrying. and we understand clearly the higher dosage group had older patients with more coronary artery disease. So that constitutes important limitations of this Brazilian study. And what the authors disturbingly quote is, which is again worrying, despite you gave high dose, they did they did look at day 2 and day 4 viral clearance, and they did not see any viral clearance. No patient had viral clearance in high dose group. Again, authors subscribe that it had no effect on viral clearance. And myocarditis was seen in 8.3% patients, and rhabdomyolysis was seen in one patient. So this is a graphical representation looking at the change in QTC. If you see, the low dose is all the blue. So for every passing day, you see that high dose had a higher QTC compared to the low dose, and that effect persisted until day 6. So until day 6, the higher dosage had a proportionately increase in the QTC compared to the lower dose group. And this is a very important graph for people who are interested in statistics. So this gray zone is the odds ratio they have looked at with the meta-analysis they did with those two studies, the French study and Chen, and they compared this gray zone with these two groups, high dose and low dose. And when they compare this high dose, you see the survival touches the lower base of the odds ratio, and that they have subscribed to as significant survival risk that you have by using high dose chloroquine. So that is the submission that authors make. So the strengths of this study is double blind. It is done in a large public hospital with 350 ICU beds, and this hospital had a good clinical practice, sort of a compliance that was there. Limitation is one single center because it was not a multi-centric, and there was no placebo group because they had only two groups, high dose and low dose, and they made conclusions that high dose is using chloroquine is not safe. So now understanding, so following this study and now the recent noise and apprehensions raised by most clinicians about the safety of hydroxychloroquine in the face of being given along with azithromycin and neuraminidase inhibitor, which exponentially increases the patients at risk for prolonged QTC, along with primary COVID itself causing myocarditis and cardiac dysfunction, puts them under tremendous stress. So for that, this Mayo Clinic has come out with these very beautiful algorithms, very specific to COVID. So I would urge the listeners to pay little attention to this. So if the QT prolongation, so any patient who is getting hydroxychloroquine with azithromycin, elderly population with comorbid should get a baseline ECG. So that is the submission they make, and it is desirable to get calcium, baseline calcium, magnesium, potassium, because any of these values which are subnormally low will put them at a risk for arrhythmias. And the guidelines suggest to look for other drugs that patients may be on, which can cause QT prolongation, and document that before we start using hydroxychloroquine with azithromycin, and try to identify the patients who are at a high risk for coronary cardiovascular disease or other comorbids, because elderly patients who have cardiovascular disease are at a much higher risk of developing prolonged QTC and arrhythmias. So these three aspects have to be borne in mind before any patient is initiated on this combination, which is a good thing for us to keep an eye on. So 1% of the population could have QTC inherently more than 500. So it is important we do a baseline ECG. Look, if QTC is more than 500, stop. So do not embark on giving them on hydroxychloroquine with azithromycin. So there is a 9% of the population where QTC may be more than, so the normal that is suggested is it should be less than 470 for males and less than 480 for females. So 9% of the population can have more than 470 to 500 range. So then the authors suggest do potassium, magnesium, maintain potassium more than 4, magnesium more than 2, and correct the potassium. And when you administer, you have to monitor ECG possibly on a daily basis to see if there is any prolongation of QTC that is happening. So you have to take it slow and very regimentally, rigorously follow potassium, magnesium, maintain it more than 4 and 2, and monitor ECG, especially because you know these patients are at a higher risk because already their baseline QTC is more than 470 and maybe less than 500. And other drugs that may be causing prolonged QTC have to be stopped. So 90% of the patients are normal QTC, less than 417 males, less than 480. There you can continue hydroxychloroquine, but during the course it is advisable that you get a ECG after 4 to 5 days of therapy, uh, or whatever the clinician feels appropriate, and look for the delta change in QTC. If there is any increase in QTC to more than 60 seconds, then you may have to again check your potassium magnesium, stop it for some time, and then reinitiate. But if QTC change, delta change is less than 60 seconds, you can continue giving hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin. So it's a good algorithm to keep in back of mind to make sure there is checks and balances whilst we are using hydroxychloroquine. So I thought it is important to deliberate on that algorithm. So this is a little controversial study which came. The reason being controversial, we saw it making rounds in an NEJM as a pre-publication manuscript, but we haven't seen a formal publication coming on NEJM. So this study was conducted by Joshua et al. In two hospitals. One of the hospital is Henry Ford Hospital, and there's another hospital. So here authors looked at primary endpoint as whether hydroxychloroquine had any effect on the escalation of the respiratory support. So what it means is when we initiate hydroxychloroquine, whether patients were weaned off respiratory support or whether they had worsening of respiratory status needing escalation of respiratory support from oxygen to high con mask to the ventilation. So that was the primary endpoint. And they also looked at the delta change in lymphocyte because lymphopenia is bad. So they saw after initiation of hydroxychloroquine whether there was assumed increase in the lymphocyte count, and they looked at the change in neutrophil lymphocyte ratio because higher neutrophil lymphocyte ratio is bad. So they saw whether with hydroxychloroquine the hypothesis was your neutrophil lymphocyte ratio comes down. So whether that happened they looked at. So these were the endpoints they looked at. So study was done as you see 19 to 26 March 2020, very recently. So here again they have used the dosage used by the previous study group, 400 mg twice daily for 2 days, followed by 400 mg once a day for 4 days. I think this is the regime most of the clinicians have subscribed to currently, where they are giving 400 mg once a day for 4 days, 4 to 5 days. So respiratory support score, they scored it, if someone is on room air, they scored it as 1. If someone needed increase from room air to supplemental oxygen 1 to 15 liters, they put it at a score of 2. So when they got intubated and mechanically, they gave a score of 3. When someone died, they gave a score of 4. This is escalation of respiratory support if that happened. So results 26% were female. So predominantly, as you see more and more, males tend to get affected with COVID. And the median age was 62.7 plus or minus 15.1. So you had 63 patients, 32 in hydroxychloroquine group and 31. So as you see, the escalation of respiratory support happened more in hydroxychloroquine group, which means it's a bad thing because you would have expected hydroxychloroquine to reduce your need for respiratory. Here there was a worsening of respiratory support, 0.76 based on this score. That was the change that happened. That was statistically significant. And the change in lymphocyte count. So you would have expected lymphocyte count to go up. So here if you see compared to control group, it's slightly come down, although it's not statistically significant. And neutrophil lymphocyte ratio, you wanted it to come down, but here it has gone up, which again is a bad sign, and that was statistically significant. And intubation rate also was higher in hydroxychloroquine. So they did a post hoc analysis in the sicker patients where neutrophil lymphocyte ratio was more than 3.13 and the age more than 50. So they took this cohort and compared between HCQ and control group, and they saw the escalation of respiratory support happened more in sicker patients, elderly patients where neutrophil lymphocyte ratio was more, which were high risk patient. There it caused more worsening of cascading of respiratory support, and that was also statistically significant. So the limitation of this study was quasi-randomized. So most of us have gone through this. This was heavily criticized. What they mean is they have done in two hospitals. In the Ford hospital, they got the RT-PCR report within 1 day. So and this arm was compared to another hospital where test was sent and hydroxychloroquine was started, but where the reports came 5 days later because of whatever logistic reason. And they compared these two groups. So which means the standard of care that is offered in these two hospitals may be entirely different because one hospital you are getting the report within 1 day, one hospital you are getting after 5 days. So one could argue the standard of care may not be homogeneous between these two, and this is the important limitation of this study. So the conclusions author make is hydroxychloroquine worsened the need for escalation of respiratory support. It had no benefit on mortality, and it had no effect on lymphopenia, and it had no effect on neutrophil lymphocyte ratio. So these are the two negative Brazilian. So Brazilian study we can little underemphasize because it has a lot of limitations. So this you could pay attention, but again here it is limited by comparing oranges and apples because two groups of patients in two different hospitals with two different standards of care, which authors themselves say, where the time lag for getting the report back was very different in these two hospitals. So now we have seen two positive, two negative. So when I gave this talk to the Kerala doctors, they wish to know what is the final say on this hydroxychloroquine. So at this point of time, the only way we could suggest is looking at these guidelines, take help of these guidelines. And my only submission was it still holds some place for the simple reason, looking at the mechanism of actions, it has at least 4 to 5 distinct uh, variables in which it acts to have a favorable effect with regards to mechanism of action. So it is not a singular mechanism of action, it has multimodal effect in which it tackles the virus. So given that in vitro ability for us to understand its robust multimodal mechanism of action, there may be some place until we get more bigger trials to conclusively say that it has no role. So right now, my take-home message would be based on these guidelines. This came from All India Institute of Medical Sciences. This came from Chinese guideline. And when you look at WHO guidelines, it puts the suggestion on the fence. It says any of these drugs that has to be used should be used in the context of a clinical trial. So this is what WHO. So WHO doesn't make comment on hydroxychloroquine or any of these novel drugs. It only says any of these innovative drugs you wish to use it under the ambit of clinical trial. So this is what the suggestion. So what are these guidelines telling? Mild cases, they say symptomatic treatment with paracetamol cough syrups. So even for mild cases, the guidelines suggest 400 mg hydroxychloroquine day 1 followed by 200 mg BD or 400 mg once a day for 4 days along with vitamin C. Our Indian protocol says vitamin C 500 mg twice a day for 5 days along with azithromycin oral 500 mg tablets plus or minus Tamiflu pending H1N1 report. In severe cases, this is in severe cases, suggestion is to do COVID-19 specific test, which is D-dimer, LDH, ferritin, high sensitivity cardiac troponin to ascertain the risk stratification, whether their outcomes may be little worrying and more attention has to be paid. And if you are giving any inhalers, inhalers has to be given as a multi-dose inhaler rather than metered dose inhaler rather than a jet nebulizer. And Indian guidelines and Chinese guidelines both suggest no role for steroids, albeit we understand there is a resurgence of hypothesis that steroids may have a beneficial role, more so when patient is in the cytokine storm period. So there is a resurgence of possible role of steroids. We need to look at any trial that may come out looking at what the effect of steroids, especially when patients are in a cytokine storm. So in severe cases, the recommendation is again hydroxychloroquine 400 mg twice a day on day 1 followed by 200 mg twice a day for 4 days. In severe sick cases where these patients have SARI and oxygen requirements are high, suggestion is you could consider lopinavir ritonavir. But in India, if you use lopinavir ritonavir, suggestion is made that ICMR has to be notified that if you are using this drug for severe cases. And one needs to keep a close eye on QTc prolongation and hypoglycemia. So thank you very much. So I would end with this nice picture. So we are in the front line at this point of time in this war against this pandemic. If you see, before we were on the back end, so now we are in the front end. So thank you very much. So you can visit my website www.drpradeep Rangappa to rehear to this lecture to gain more clarity and insights. Thank you.